Hi everyone. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 9 must-watch black horror movies from the 90s. Black horror in the 80s took a nosedive in popularity. However, with the success of key individuals and sweeping cultural change, we saw the genre resurface in the 90s. The 90s is only second to the 70s in terms of the cultural impact of black horror. The 90s didn't produce as many black horror movies as the 70s, but still had just as much of a cultural impact as the 70s due to widespread influence of black characters outside of just black horror and into mainstream horror. Before we get into it, if you like this video, please like this video. If you want more content, check out our channel and hit the subscribe button for future content. And let us know, what is your favorite black horror movie from the 90s? Without further ado, here are 9 must-watch black horror movies from the 90s. Number 9. The Night of the Living Dead remake. Coming off of the success of the original 1968 film, Night of the Living Dead's 1990 rendition of the film comes off as a reanimated corpse of the first. Spawning from fears of illegal remakes appearing as the original film, this film seems to have been made with the idea of preserving the sanctity of the first. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the original Night of the Living Dead had the unfortunate experience of losing its copyright mark when editing the film. This caused the original film to be placed in the public domain, thus nowadays you can pretty much find a free copy anywhere, especially on YouTube. Much like the original, the film starts off with Barbara visiting the cemetery with her brother Johnny. The two are attacked by ghouls, who we now recognize as zombies, and Barbara loses her brother in the process. Barbara runs away from the cemetery and seeks shelter at a local house, where she meets Ben. Ben and Barbara both clear out the area of the zombies before taking shelter in the house. They board up the house and prepare to defend themselves and wait for help. Ben and Barbara run into Harry, Helen, and Sarah Cooper, and the couple, Judy and Tommy. Tensions grow between the three parties as they decide how they want to deal with the situation. Overall, this remake was both necessary and unnecessary. I understand the need to create a film that's similar to the original to preserve the copyright, but that's all it is. There isn't much added onto the film that would warrant calling it a serious remake, but it's great to see an iconic movie get a bit of an upgrade because that's exactly what this film feels like. The film includes better cameras, effects, and more money, all with the same story though. Number 8. Tales from the Crypt, Demon Night. After watching Tales from the Crypt Demon Night, I wonder why this film popped up when I typed black horror films in my search bar. It's not one of the first films you'll see, but if you scroll over a bit to the right, there it is. After watching this film, I remember thinking that I guess in some ways this film is a black horror film when you consider its history and origin. The film follows Breaker, who is being pursued by the Collector for a secret artifact used by demons to bring back the darkness. The chase leads the two to a boarding house occupied by Irene, Cordelia, Wally, Geraldine, and Uncle Willie. When the Collector's cover is blown at the boarding house, he summons a legion of demons to help him collect. The group then use the artifact to seal the boarding house. However, the Collector uses manipulation to get the group to turn on one another as they decide how to escape. It seems like your standard run-of-the-mill horror film during which all the characters that are black play side roles. But even with just the inclusion of CCH Pounder and Jada Pinkett Smith, we can't forget that this film's vision comes from the mind of a black man in Ernest Dickerson. Now, Ernest Dickerson isn't just some random person that they got to direct the film either. Dickerson has a long history of working on black films and horror, and he's even worked on horror movies that are more directly associated with black culture. So it's easy to see that the visual legacy of the film comes from the eyes of a black person. Number 7. Death by Temptation. Death by Temptation is an obscure black horror movie that more people should know about. It's a wonderful look at what passion can do for even the smallest projects. Death by Temptation came from the mind of James Bond III, who wrote, directed, and starred in the film. It's a horror film that explores matters of faith and temptation. On a deeper level, it can be argued that the film is a tale about sexuality and promiscuity. It's your classic femme fatale horror movie. It tells the story of a demon known as the Temptress who seduces men through temptation. She kills them and takes their soul. Joel is a famous priest looking to get away for a while. He visits his cousin Kay in New York, where the two meet the Temptress, who is more deadly than she seems. On the surface, the horror elements are pretty solid for the time. Effects are better than those from even the old classic blaxploitation horror films of the 70s. I guess this is what happens when you have an entire decade for an industry to grow. The set design, although sparse, is used to the best of its ability to create a unique, horrific atmosphere for the time period, and this film even has arguably one of the most iconic death scenes in all of black horror, and I'd even put it on a pantheon of great horror movie moments. Number 6. Candyman. Candyman is a horror staple. If you ask just about any horror fan, they've probably seen it. On a wider scale, the film gives us another black boogeyman. But was that enough to consider it a positive, successful addition to the genre of black horror? Candyman was released in 1992. It starred Tony Todd as the titular character and tells the story of Helen Lyle, a college student doing a thesis on urban legends with her colleague Bernadette. The two decide to use Candyman as a focus for their study in an effort to prove that societies create boogeymen to cope with everyday. Their search leads them to the notorious Cabrini Green housing projects where a woman named Ruthie Ann was killed. When Helen is attacked after visiting the apartment complex, she is able to ID the killer. She figures that the urban myth is solved, but after invoking the spirit of Candyman, she becomes the suspect for the murders of the people closest to her. And unfortunately, although Candyman paints itself as in line and focus with the idea of racial injustice and black trauma, most of the black characters that experience this trauma, which is the source of Candyman's power, are side characters. We don't see the story from any of their perspectives, and none of them are proactive in solving their own issues. The scene at the end with Helen returning Anthony to Anne Marie makes me consider why we didn't see Annie Marie searching for her own child. Ultimately, the film tries to capture the essence of black trauma in a story that examines how trauma and poverty can cause our own societal boogeymen. However, the film really suffers from a lack of experience in that department. It's a black story not being told by black people, so I feel that the film is an attempt at trying to capture the essence of black films, but doesn't pack as much as a punch as it could have. Overall, Candyman is a good, fun horror movie, but I do feel if it were trying to say something about race, it could have said it louder and clearer for the people in the back. Number 5. Vampire in Brooklyn. Vampire in Brooklyn is a comedic horror masterpiece. This film is a unique combination of horror and comedy. This film doesn't have much to say in terms of a theme, however. The film seems like a retelling of Blackula, but instead of Prince Mabuwalde, we have Maximilian. The film includes an all-black cast and even mentions African traditional religions through mentions of voodoo. The film centers around Maximilian, who journeys to Brooklyn in pursuit of a half-vampire mate. His goal is to ensure the survival of his vampiric bloodline. Maximilian crosses paths with Rita Verdier, a tough police officer who becomes entangled in a mysterious series of events. As Maximilian attempts to seduce Rita, comedic and supernatural elements unfold. The film combines horror and humor, showcasing Eddie Murphy's versatility as an actor. It explores themes of love, identity, and the clash between the supernatural and the everyday, all while delivering laughs and thrills in equal measure. Number 4. People Under the Stairs. People Under the Stairs was a black horror film that came from an unlikely source. The story explores the idea of gentrification, classism, and racism in urban areas. People Under the Stairs presents itself as a comedy but had touches of horror spread throughout it as well. This story was a unique take on gentrification, tackling it from a horror movie perspective. This film takes the young black male and makes him the lead in his own story in a new generation of black horror. People Under the Stairs tells the story of Poindexter, also known as Fool. Fool grows up in the ghetto in Los Angeles, and his family is on the verge of being evicted for being only 3 days late on their rent. The Robesons own Fool's apartment building and want to kick everybody out so they can tear down the building and rebuild it for more money. In order to feed his family and get money for the rent, Fool is convinced to sneak into the landlord's house by his sister's friend, Leroy. The operation is a bust when the crew stumble upon a larger, much more nefarious scheme behind the family that owns the neighborhood. The film is an immediate take on the idea of gentrification in many areas. Los Angeles' story of gentrification is a good example, and People Under the Stairs doesn't shy away from presenting the villains as a white American family. It's a bold statement, but I can't help but question how much the comedy element was added so that this aspect of the film didn't step on any toes. Number 3. Beloved. At first glance, this film doesn't seem like a horror movie. To many, Beloved is simply a movie about slavery. So why is this movie considered in our list of horror movies? I can see this being seen as just another Color Purple or slave movie to others, but that is a severe understatement. This film is well worth its genre classification. It's just that the story doesn't deal with any stereotypical horror elements that you'd come to see in many horror movies at the time. However, with that being said, the film contains several elements that would be associated with horror. It contains supernatural entities, physical and sexual violence, and overall pain. But it isn't presented in a commercial way and has a very unique cultural aspect that makes it avoid being a simple horror film. It depicts the horrific reality of Black Americans. The story follows Setha, a former slave living in Cincinnati, Ohio, who manages to escape Sweet Home, a slave plantation. She lives with her daughter, Denver, and is haunted by a poltergeist. When she is visited by an old friend, Paul D., Setha finds herself in love again and revitalized from the daily struggles of life. But when a mysterious girl by the name of Beloved arrives on her doorsteps, she finds that there is more to the young woman than meets the eye. Setha cares for Beloved as if she were her very own. Paul D. suspects that there's more to the story, and they all eventually find out the truth hidden in the past. Beloved is a unique Black American horror tale, as it not only comes from the mind of a Black woman, but also depicts the horror Black people face, especially those horrors experienced by Black women during this time period. The film was an adaptation of Toni Morrison's book of the same title. The story is not just the tale of some ex-slave going about their day, but if one pays attention, it's a depiction of the hypocrisy in America that so many people are ashamed to acknowledge. This film has the audacity to challenge the taboo for horror films to explore slavery. Number 2, Blade. Blade is the first ever Marvel superhero movie with iconic scenes. This film was an action horror movie that revolutionized superhero movies. It's seen as one of the most crucial movies as its success set the stage for Marvel movies until this day. The story follows Blade, a vampire with the ability to walk in daylight. Blade hunts down vampires and protects mankind. When a doctor is bitten, she is exposed to a world she never knew. It leads an unlikely duel on the tracks of the infamous Deacon Frost, a vampire revolutionist looking to awaken a vampire god. The image of Blade is one that is unforgettable. This film saw the likes of a positive Black male protagonist who's strong and capable. Blade is a force to reckon with as he takes down groups of men with ease. It was more than an action movie. Blade was an icon. Blade was the main character and never once had any fear of dying first. It's like if Prince Mamuwalde from Blackula became an action star. Number 1. Tales from the Hood. Tales from the Hood is a quintessential black horror film. It's the perfect example for what we look for when we talk about black horror. It's a balanced fusion of entertainment, horror, and commentary. Tales from the Hood follows 3 drug dealers, Stack, Bulldog, and Ball, looking to pick up the shit from a creepy old mortician by the names of Mr. Sims. While they search for the shit, Mr. Sims shares with them several tales of monsters and spirits. The film is in contention for the best black horror film in existence. Reason being is because it not only meets the requirements, but it performs them exceptionally. The film is rooted in Black American culture. It explores a wide range of black settings, from the black family to the streets to the plantations, and it fuses horror with black history to make a statement. This film exemplifies how black horror can talk about important and intense situations through the medium of storytelling. Tales from the Hood is a creative work of horror that sits as an example of how horror can dive deep as well as entertain. For black people, this film is a representation of black culture in the form of a horror movie. So there you have it. These are 9 must-watch black horror movies from the 90s. If you like this video, like this video. If you dislike it, dislike it. See you in the next one. Peace.